We're back. Sorry about that quick delay. It's, again, COMP391, week 9, lesson 9, part 2. So we just started setting up this cube thing in the ground, and you guys should know how to do this very quickly. So on an exam, I'm going to get you to do the exact same thing. I'm going to say set up a player, set up a ground, you know, get your logic brick set up. Okay, the next piece. So we've got this stuff going. Let's check our physics for both the pieces, right? So remember, Blender game uses physics. I'm going to click on the cube itself. This is the player cube. I'm going to go over here to the physics button, right? And if you notice right now it says static. Let's change that to player, okay? If you go, or character is what it is, right? We want to change to character. I also want to make it so that the character is an actor. Okay, this is important. I also want to look to add collision bounds. These are good things, so I'm changing this to collision bounds. And if you notice what actor does, it says object is detected by the near and radar sensor, right? Near and radar sensor. Okay. Changing also this piece here. Right-clicking on the cube, on the ground surface. I'm leaving it as static, right? Again, I don't need to make this an actor because it doesn't need to be detected by the near and radar sensor. I don't need to do that. Also, if you notice, if I click on collision bounds, right? I can click this on as well. And this will add the collision detection for my ground, right? From a cube perspective, I click back on the player cube and I look at my material, right? The material itself on the bottom has physics options here. If you notice physics, I have friction, I have a force, I have different things that I can do here, how elastic it is and so on. I'm going to leave all these as default objects, right? Remember, we talked very, very briefly here about physics, not too much. The other thing I'd like to do is I know that my world, okay, if I go click my world icon, which is right here, the fourth one from the left, right? Here's my world icon. If I click this one and if I scroll down, if I notice that my gravity, right, for my world is 9.8, right? I still think it's nice for a real simulation. It's great. But for real games, you need something much better than this. Let's make this 30. Now what this does, there's a good thing and bad thing about this. The good thing is that it makes it really heavier. Objects fall a lot faster. That's really great. On the downside, it also makes objects appear to be heavier, right? Because the material, I'm changing it from 9.8 to 30, so they're going to adhere to other materials a lot more, right? So we have to modify some other stuff later on when we want to push objects around. Okay, this is the one piece. So I've done my duty. One more thing, if I press the N button in my viewport, I want to definitely change my shaders so that it doesn't use multi-texture, but rather it uses GLSL. Remember, from a gaming perspective, this is the right thing to do, right? Let's leave the rest of them open. For example, you could use backface culling. In most games, we use backface culling, so when we hide the textures and even the entire face that's not being seen, right? It actually makes for a much more robust game. If you have multiple faces and vertices, right, that you're dealing with, who cares about what's inside the cube, right? We don't care about that. But we really, but for now, let's leave it on because, you know, I don't want to mess you guys up when we do some basic stuff here. Okay, so that's basically our setup for right now from our materials. I'm going to get rid of the numeric sidebar there. And if you look down at this area here where we've created this logic editor section, right now my cube, because my player cube has been highlighted, that is the one that I'm putting on my logic bricks. Okay, so if I pull this up a little bit more so you guys can see, right, who cares about this right now? This is my player. I'm going to make this larger so you can see as well. I'm going to make this larger here yet so you can see. And if you notice, right, my logic for my player that's the one that's highlighted. If I click on my ground, take a look, click my ground, now my ground is the one I'm adding logic bricks to. Okay, I don't want to add logic bricks to my ground. I want to add logic bricks to my player. I could also use the outliner, here's my outliner, to select my object that I want to add the logic bricks to. So here's my selection, I select my player, and now it's player that I'm adding the logic bricks to. Again, logic bricks are just programming logic that we're adding in without actually doing any scripting. They're built-in scripts that we're going to be using. Again, it's a good way of learning how to do stuff with 3D. Okay, first thing, we need to add some sensors. So here's the little lab for today. Add 4 sensors, right? And by the way, this is what you're going to probably do in your exam on Friday, right? Or test on Friday. 4 sensors, right, for movement, forward, back, left, and right, and a jump sensor. All right, so let's do that. And then I want you to add the correlating or the the related actuator. Remember, actuator is like an event handler. That's what it does, right? The sensor is an event listener, right? Here's the event listener. Here's the event handler. And then the handler, I want you to set up some motion actuators so that the player can move forward and back, left and right, and jump. How would you do that? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that while I do it, right? So again, I'm going to set it up with a bunch of keyboard actuators, keyboard sensors. And you guys can go ahead. I'm just going to do it very quickly, right? So that way, if you guys know how to do it, you should know how to do it this fast at this point, right? And nothing better than learning when you have a test, right? All right. So again, I kind of add all my sensors first, and then I kind of do all my actuators after, because they're just the same actuator over and over again. The challenge with the actuators is the motion. So if you notice, if I want to move the guy left first, on my player, then obviously I'm going to move him on the left. I'm going to change my location to left. I recommend a 0.2 blender unit change, okay, at least, to make your character a little bit faster. If you make it 0.1, it might be a little bit too slow. So let's go -2 there. And I'm going to check you guys in a second to see if you've done this right? Because I want to make sure you guys have all this stuff done. By the way, a lot of this logic brick stuff, some people might say something like, Tom, how come we're using logic bricks and not scripting? Now we're talking. I love the fact that you guys want to script. Right on, right? But the problem is that we have to learn how to walk before we run, right? And by the way, logic bricks, although you may say, hey, it's only a Blender thing, right? Who cares about learning them? Actually, it's not just a Blender thing. They use blueprints for Unreal, and are very similar to using logic bricks in Blender, right? So if you're using the Unreal Engine, it's very similar to creating almost like this logic without scripting. And you know what? I messed up. So don't worry, Vanessa, just go ahead and try it, and then worst case, I'll correct it in a bit. Try it on your own first. It gives you a different response. All right, so I've got my logic brick set up. Did you guys get it all set up? It should be about that fast. All right, like that's how fast I want you to work on the test. If you don't know how to do this, I'd practice beforehand. I'd practice, day before, like on Thursday, which would be tomorrow. So that way, when we do the test on Friday, then you're good with logic bricks. There's not like a big delay on how to get it done. If I say logic bricks, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, cool. So I've got this stuff set up. Now the next phase is testing. All right. I'll go over how I did it in a second. I want to wait till everyone else has tried it out, right? Okay, so let's test this out. The testing button is the P button for play, right? Hey, how come I'm getting this white screen? I'm getting this white screen because over here I need to set my viewport shading mode to at least texture, right? So if I don't get this view, it's a problem. So I'm just going to kind of scroll out here for a second. All right. So I can see my player. And I got my light source is kind of in the middle. I'm going to kind of put it more in the middle. And my ground is kind of reflective. You know what? I don't want to make my ground reflective. That doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to take away the specularity of the ground, reflectivity, if you will. And you know what? I want to also increase my light source strength just to make it a little bit stronger. From energy of 1, I'm going to go to energy of 2. See how that works. That's a little better, right? Lights up my game board a little bit more. Okay, cool. So I got my light source. I got my game board. I've got my logic bricks all set up. Now's the testing time. I press P for play. And now, if everything goes well, my object moves forward and back, left to right, and also jumps. Okay, you guys should have all that working right now. Yeah? Sure. So let's look and see how I did all that. So again, the first piece is you need to go and add in your logic bricks for your sensors. This is what I do. And right now I've got my first keyboard sensor that I kind of added. I added a keyboard sensor. And if you notice, I have to click on this area that says key and then select the key that I'm going to be using for my keyboard. So in this particular case, I've selected the A key. So it moves to the left, right?
Oh,
now,
no, for the part where you play it, the white screen.
Oh, that. You have to change this. The shading, viewport shading has to change the material at least.
Okay.
All right? Okay, so this is what I've done with my my logic bricks, right? One thing I didn't do is I didn't rename it, and I highly recommend you rename these things because one day you might script this Blender stuff, and you want to be able to access it, right? So I'm going to call this the A key, right? And so I know which ones they are as well. My D key, oops. If I select the right key and the right thing I'm trying to change, my D key, right? There's my D key, and then I've got my my W key. So you go, what we're trying to do here is we're kind of prepping for the test that's going to happen on Friday. So I'd like you to open up Blender, make a player, make a ground, add basic logic bricks to go left and right, forward and back, and jump. Okay, go ahead. So this is just prep time. Okay, and S key. Here's my S key, right? And the last one is my space bar. This is my space bar. My space bar actually makes it jump. So I know all my keys. This is what they all do. It's all labeled here nicely, and they're added in for my player. On the right, I've got my motions, right? And they just say motion right now. I'm going to rename those as well. So my character motion, this is moving to the left because that's what my A key does, right? So I'll say move left, right? Move left. And we'll say this one is move right. I'm just renaming them just so that I can see them as well, right? And this one here is move forward. Notice I didn't say move up. Move forward. Move up means on the Z direction. And this one is move back. Right? Forward and back. And this one is jump, right? I just made this the jump motion, right? And I have to use, the only way you can click the jump motion. There's different ways of doing this, but the main way is to make sure that the player, and there's because it's a character, if you click on jump, that's all you need to click on. It'll actually put it in. Now you can, if you want to, you can definitely configure how far the player will jump, because it appears, if I go to my physics as an example, and this is for my character, it says jump height, or this is my step height, and there's also a jump force of 10. You can change this jump force to whatever you want. Sometimes jump force of 10 may not be enough, right? You may want to tweak this a little bit with your world, especially since we've increased our gravity to 30, right, in our world, right? Our fall speed max is 55. That's pretty good too. Sometimes we want to increase that a little bit more too to make our fall speed a little bit more than what it is. So gravity, it'll increase to 55 max. But it'll get there quite fast. Okay, so let's just test this stuff out to make sure that it all works now, right? So I've got my basic game board, right? And again, the focus of today's lesson is scoring, right? Okay, so I'm going to press P for play. I'm going to test my guy out. Let's see if he falls off the edge. He does. That's good. Escape for getting out of game mode. P for playing again. And then I'm going to move him to the left, and he falls on that side. He's actually moving pretty good. I'm pretty happy with his motion. One thing I'd like to do, if you notice the camera, right? And right now my camera is set up way on the side over here, right? So if I actually wanted to get my camera to follow the player, what would I do? Anybody? What would I do? How do I make my camera follow the player? I can parent it, right? That's the way to go. So parenting is something that we want to do with the camera, right? And if I wanted to make it so that the camera only sees what the player sees. Now in this particular case, we're playing almost like a top-down or three-quarter down view. It's okay if we have the camera view here, but I don't like the camera being over here. I want to kind of make the camera view back here, so I want to use the camera view. Well, the quick way to do that, of course, is to go View, and then if I go to, once I go to View, And then where it says align view, right? And there's different ways to do that. And align active camera to view is what I want to do, which is Control Alt Numpad 0 if you wanted to try the shortcut. When I do that, watch. It actually moves the camera to what I'm seeing. Now this isn't exactly what I want to see. I want to see my player, right? So the other thing I can do is press the N key, right? And of course, like we did before, I want to use this checkbox that says lock camera to view, right? And I want to scroll out again a little bit more, right? And just move my camera in to the exact position that I want it, right? Behind the player. Okay, cool. If this was going to be my view for the game, I'm just going to unlock the camera to view for a second and make this a little bit larger. If this was going to be my view to the game, right? There are a couple things I could do here. Okay, one of the things is I could make my, and I'll put this to you in a second, right? I could align my my camera to a scoreboard that's fixed somewhere in three-dimensional space, right? This is one way to do it, so that my camera's looking at the scoreboard that's actually physically there, right? Now it wouldn't be a colliding thing or whatever. That's one thing. The other thing we can do is create a HUD, right? A heads-up display. A heads-up display is also, we can also use something called an overlay, where it actually it's actually existing in another layer or another scene, if you will. And the scene, one scene overlays on top of this one. So there's different ways of doing this thing, right? But let's do it the simple way at the beginning, right? So one way is I want to realign my board, right? I want to create a scoreboard, like an actual scoreboard, physically on the screen somewhere, which is probably going to be here on the background. In order for me to do that, I'm going to do a couple things. Shift S. I'm going to get my cursor to center again, just to make sure my selection, my cursor is to the center. There it is. There's my center, right? And now what I want to do is I want to Shift A and add a plane. Okay, my plane is flat, and that's no good, right? I don't want my plane to be flat. I want my plane to be up and down, right? So I'm going to rotate this thing on the x-axis 90 degrees. So there's my plane, okay? I'm creating a plane for a couple of reasons. That way I can actually see my scoreboard a little differently. If I want to make my scoreboard white or some other kind of color, or black even, I'd want to kind of align this thing so that way it is way over here, right? So I'm going to push my scoreboard, kind of over here, my plane. This is my plane right now. It's kind of small. And I want to stretch it. I want to use the S key to resize this thing so it takes up part of my screen. There we go. So this is where my plane is going to be, my scoreboard. Now I can make it smaller and do whatever kind of things. It's a little bit shiny for me. I don't want to make it shiny, so I'll take away the shine, right? So I'm going to go into my material, right? And in my material, I'm going to add a new material. I'm going to make this scoreboard white, right? Just because I want to. So I'm going to choose white in the middle, let's say, approximately. But I'm going to take away my specularity, right? So there it is. It looks kind of a grayish material. If I want to make it more white, I'm going to push it into the white zone over here, right? So, and again, if you notice RGB values right now, if I want to make them so they're white, I'm just going to push them over to the white side. So they're all one, right? From a gameplay perspective, if I press P now, it looks like this. It's almost like I have a scoreboard, like literally on the end. Now, what I don't want to do is I don't want to make this a collider, right? By default, this board over here becomes something you can collide with, right? Okay, so if I want to take that away, I want to make this visible, a visible area, right? Because this is where I'm going to have everything. And I'll show you why I'm doing this in a second. This is differently one way. See where it says static? Here's my physics for my scoreboard, right? There's different things you can use here. You can use static, dynamic, rigid. I definitely want to make it static because if I make it something else, it'll fall, right? I don't want that to happen. What I do want is two things, right? I want it so that it's definitely it's not invisible, right? But I definitely want to make it a ghost. If you notice, object does not react to collisions like a ghost, right? So this is one thing I want to make it. So this is a ghost. I can pass right through it. Okay, this thing here. All right, cool. So this is where I'm going to put my scoreboard. This is where I'm going to put my score, right? Now the good thing is I can just like zoom into it, right? So this is zoom into that my wall, Here it is. I'm going to get rid of my N key to make it a little bigger, realign it a little bit. So when I, from a rotation perspective, I can press if I press the 1 button on my keyboard, I'll actually make it into front perspective. I'll change it to front ortho for a second so I can see my scoreboard. There's front ortho mode for my scoreboard. I do see a little bit of specularity. I definitely don't want specularity on my scoreboard, so I'm going to take that right down so that there's no no reflection. There is a little bit of lighting, and if I want to take my lighting away, what would I do? How do I take my lighting and my shading away? Shadeless is the way to go, right? Now this might be a little bit too bright, but this is white, right? I'm trying to make it a white background, right? And remember, I'm trying to make it a scoreboard, right? Okay, now I want to add in here, like text, right? Where I'm going to have my score and everything else. One thing is I want to make my plane, here's my plane. I want to change this for now to scoreboard. Follow me here as we do this. Here's scoreboard. I want to add 2 text objects. And if you notice, I want to click on this thing, left click now, with my 3-dimensional cursor because that's where I want my text to appear. We're going to modify this in a second because we need to flip the text so it's so we can actually see it, right? Okay, I'm going to make my text black, right? And I need to add text. I'm going to go Shift A. We're going to add text. Here's my text, and if I can't see it right now, so if you notice, if I just move it from a perspective mode, where is my text? I added it in there, right? Well, it's there, but you can't see it because it's flat like this, see? So I've got to rotate this across the x-axis 90 degrees. So I'm going to take my text, rotate it across the x-axis 90 degrees, right? Here's my text. And let's go back into that perspective mode that I did before, right? So here's my user ortho mode. Here it is. Okay, so here's my text. Now remember, how do we modify text? If I want to modify this text, first of all, I want to move it into position, or I want to put it on my scoreboard. Now, it's got to be visible, so we're going to have to play with this a little bit. My text is here, right? One thing I do not want to do if I'm going to make a scoreboard, a text, I want to keep it text. I don't want to convert this into like a Blender mesh, because if I do that, I can't modify it afterwards. I want to be able to modify this with code, so that's why I need it to be text. Okay. So in order for me to modify my text, if I want to type something in my text, how do I do it? Edit, right? So I'm going to press Tab, go into edit mode, and then go back in here, and then I'm going to type in something like score, right? Now I'm going to just use one score as an example. Okay, so there's my score. And this is going to stay stable, right? I'm not going to actually do anything here with this thing, right? So this, right now, is my score label, right? So if you notice from a text perspective, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to call this score label. That's my label for my score, right? That may not be my score itself, right? That's just my score label. That's what I've made it here in the outliner, right? Okay, a couple things I need to do with my score label. I'm going to get out of edit mode, go back into object mode, and I need to add a material for this thing, or else you're not going to see it, right? So I'm going to go right back in here. I'm going to go into new material, and I'm going to make this thing black because I want to make it black. You can make it whatever color you want, all right? I want to make my score black. I'm also going to make this thing shadeless because I don't want it to be affected by any kind of lighting, right? That's the first thing I want to do here. And there's my score. I'm not changing the font. You can make it nice. You can change the font. You can do all this nice stuff. I'm not going to. I'm just going to name my material black for now. I haven't done it with the others. I will go back and do that. I'm just trying to rush through this to get it done. Also, from a specularity, if you notice, specularity goes away. If I make it shadeless, I don't need to touch my specularity because there is no specularity if there's no shadowing, right? So here's my score. Score label. One thing I need to do because we're playing physics is over here, right? If you notice how physics has no collision, that's a good thing, right? If you add collisions or make it, some kind of physics or whatever, that's bad. I want to leave it at no collision. You could also change it to something else like a static body and make it so that it's is a ghost as well, but no collision might be the best way for text. Okay, cool. So I've got my text. I want to kind of duplicate this thing, right? So I'm going to Shift D, right? And I'm going to go across the x-axis. I'm going to pull my score next to it, just so it's on the same line, right? Shift D, pulled it across, and I'm going to press Tab to edit it. And this time I'm going to go in there and press a 0, right? Like score starts off at 0, right? So now I've got two scores, right? Two score labels. One score label that is here, this one here, and the other one score label which is here, which is this actual score itself. But this isn't going to be my score label. I'm going to change this score label here to say score, because that's the one I want to actually change. Make sense? Okay, so I've got my score and everything else. Did you guys get everything going? So far, you guys with me?
Shift D and move.
Shift D and then move along the x-axis by pressing X. Shift D and then X.
The previous score, I can see both of them.
Yeah, I'm having the same issue.
Can't see both?
Yeah, it's
I can change the object selection and see. I can see, but I cannot see.
Well, you have to make it shadeless. Make sure it's shadeless. Make sure it's like, yeah, make sure that there's no thing. But if you notice, there's a couple things here. Let's take a look. My score is actually floating outside of my background, right? I'll come around in a second and make sure everyone's on the same page. For example, if I was to move both these objects, right, because I've selected both, I can move them back. If I bury them, they can actually bury physically. Look, they're physically in here, right? So I can move a little bit back for my score. One thing I could have done differently, which I kind of forgot to do, I'll be honest with you, is make the score a little bit thicker, right? Because I still can modify this. I'm going to select my score label, and if I go to where it says the F icon here on the right, on the top here, I can modify the thickness and so on by changing things like. So I'm not going to change my bevel, but I definitely want to change my extrusion level, because if you look at the actual score itself, it's like paper thin, right? So if I want to make this, let's say, a little thicker, I can. I'm going to move this to a little thicker. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about here. Here's my score. Take a look now. Now it's a little thicker, right? And the same thing. So it's not. It has a little bit of thickness. This one has. I kind of extruded it to let's say 0.03, 0.03, and I'll do the same thing. And I'll do the same thing with my other object. And I'm just going to zoom this up to 0.03. Just so that way it's got a little bit of thickness to it. You guys can see both scores now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so there's my score. One is a label. The other one is an actual value that I'm going to be using, okay? Okay, so now remember, I got to be able to see my score somehow, right? So if I go back, if I shift back to where I can see my game board again, I'm just going to move it back into user perspective mode, and I move back out, right? Here's my score. Can I see my score? Well, can I though? Right. Does that make sense that it should be that way over there? And why have I lit it up like this? I've lit it up to give it a kind of a contrast. That's all I've done. You don't have to do it this big now, right? I mean, if you want to make it so that the score is visible and that it looks like it's lit up, you can make it so that the box just surrounds the score, right? So I can just go back to my my scoreboard, and I can only put in the size that I want. So let's just resize this thing. Again, there's a couple ways to do this. One way that I like to work, if I don't want to see my other objects when I do my modeling, is I want to turn them off. So I can go to my eye, here's the eye on the outliner, right? And just click the eye off for the things I don't want to see. Like I don't care to see the player right now. I don't want to see the lamps or the ground, right? I can get rid of that thing. So I can work just with the score. I don't even care about the camera, right? All I care about is the score, the scoreboard, and the score label. Okay, cool. Now if I click on the actual scoreboard and tab into it, right, and I deselect everything, and if I use B-select mode and with wireframe mode, here's wireframe mode, I'll go to B-select mode, right, border select mode. I'm going to just select the bottom. I'm going to draw this thing up a little bit, just so, because I don't need to, have the whole scoreboard that big. I'll make a little box for myself, right? And the same thing goes with the other side. So I'm going to say B-select mode for now. Let's say if I only have my score, that's all I cared about. I'm just going to make my box approximately the size of my scoreboard. So let me take a look. I'm going to go into one mode. This is nice and flat, right? And my score looks in wireframe mode, looks like this now. And it's front ortho mode that I'm looking at, right? So it's perfectly flat. I'm just making my box just surround my score a little bit. So I'm just going to deselect all, go into B mode. There we go. So it's just a box around things, right? So I can see my score up here. And now that I've got this, of course, I can parent them together and move them around and do all kinds of lovely stuff with it, right? Okay, back into solid mode, right? And I want to go back into texture mode so I can see what it looks like. This is my score. It's just a box around my actual score. Right now, it's kind of floating there in space, right? Let's turn everything back on so I can see the rest of my stuff again. And I want to scroll out. And if you notice, I see my score kind of hanging there, right? Now, if my score is not in the right position, right, I'm just going to move into perspective mode again, right? And I'm going to highlight, I'm going to kind of get back out of edit mode into object mode, and I'm going to move my object around and down. If I think this is too far away, right, and which it is, it's way far over here, right? I've just put it to the back to modify it. If I want to bring it closer, there's a couple things I can do, right? I could move it physically closer. Remember, it's not something the player can collide with, right? I don't want to make it too close because this is my perspective mode. My camera looks like this. Here's my camera mode, right? I can't see my score at all here, right? So if I want to make it visible to my camera, I'm going to lock my camera to view and rotate my camera so I can start seeing my score. Sometimes we want to make it so that it's visible, right, in the camera, which I like to do. Get rid of lock camera to view, right? And then now rotate this up. I want to kind of select this, my score and my scoreboard and all that kind of stuff, right? Here's everything. I want to select it all. So the way I can select it all, of course, is on my outliner is the easiest way. I want to select my score label, and my scoreboard, right? And then I can move all those down so I can see them. Right, back to camera. Not quite down enough. Let's keep doing that down. There's my score, right? And this is what I actually see, right? Score 0. Now if you notice, there's a bit of an angle there. Why? Because it's the perspective mode of my player. If I press P for play, hey, my score goes away. How come? How come? I can't see my score anymore. My score is gone. Like it's when I'm in play mode. What's that? No, my scoreboard, my text. If you notice my text here, if I go back to here, right? Or sorry, to this, shadeless. How come I can't see it? Well, let's go. Multi-texture is working, right? Multi-texture is GLSL. So can you see your score when you go into play mode? These are the things we have to talk about, right? Because otherwise, you know, you're going to try this out at home and you're going to be like, holy crap, I can't see my score at all, right? Let's get back out of this number mode. And if I go back into play mode, it looks like my character's moving, right? It moves underneath my score. It moves beyond my score, right? But my score itself is invisible somehow, right? Take a look. Even though in this mode here, right, I can see it, right? Even from an angle, if I go P, right, it's like my score is completely invisible. How come? Anybody have an idea why? You can see yours? I can't see mine. How come? Can you see yours? Can you see yours? Can everyone see their score in play mode?
Yeah, I can see, but it's white.
One thing to check always with your score itself, right? If from a physics perspective is, did you make it invisible by accident? That would be bad, right? Because sometimes what we do is we don't know, we're not watching carefully enough, and we don't make our score, the actual text itself, visible, which is bad, right? Also, just to also let you know, I've also made mine black, right? You may have made it another color. Not sure what color you made it, right? But if I go to F for my font, or for my material because it's black, as an example, my material isn't shadeless, right, for my score. I've made my option, I've turned it off, right? I could also change my material color. If I want to check this out, see how low it is in terms of intensity? I'd have to make the intensity a lot higher. My intensity is low, right? And what I can do is I can make it so that I turn this down. There's two ways of making it black. I've turned my intensity way low, and you didn't catch that, right? Here's 0, 0, 0, right, for black. My intensity, my diffuse, is completely low, right? So if I press play, it begun. What if I go up a little bit? So here's my black. I increase my intensity, right? Make it like this, and do I see it now? No. So that's not something that is the problem, right? All right, we got to fix this out, because if you don't make this happen, you can't see your score. There's no point, right? Okay, what else? Let's see if it's a red. If I make it red, can I see my score? No. And then the other thing you got to think about is the score turned in a way that I can see it? If I go to the other side of my score, like this, and I take my plane, this plane here. So I'm gonna just, here's my scoreboard. There's another thing. Look at my scoreboard. My scoreboard's handlebars are way down here. I want to do set origin to geometry, just so I can control my scroll bar. I'm going to take this away here, like this. Okay, can I see it now? Yes, I can. And it's white, right? But my score's red. How come I can't see it in gameplay when it's white? If I make it take shadeless away, oh, go back to that. Sorry. If I go back here, and here's my score, and I take shadeless away from my score for a second. Just going to show you this, right? Here's my white background. I made it white on black, or black on white. If I press it, it's still white. How come? Anybody? Do you guys get all white too? Or do you actually get a color? How come? These are the questions that you're going to have to ask yourself, right? So changing the color, or actually, making a color for our background. I've chosen to make it black. So here I'll make it black. So I'll just turn this all down to 0. There's my black score. Hold on a second. My black material. And when I press play, it becomes white. Now I'm going to take the shadeless away from both things. So there's shading, right? And all that kind of stuff. And when I press play, it's white. Right? Now, right now I have my diffuse as an example. That's another thing I want to take a look at here. My intensity is 0.8. I'll turn this up to 1, right? So for purely intense, it's white, right? If I change my intensity, if I lower my intensity down to something lower, and I press play, it's still white. How come? Anybody have any ideas? Here's another thing I want to do. What if I change my shader type? So here's right now I'm on Lambert. What if I go to something like Toon, right? Different kind of shader, press play, it's white. Okay, if I go back to Lambert, that's what it was, it's the default, right? Here it is. I got wire, I got volume, I got halo, right? There's another one here that says save this to data block, right? Volume, and press play, white. Right? So of course, in this particular case, if you've got the same thing as I do, you'd probably want to look it up like this. So watch this. No, seriously, right? You go like this. You go font or text shows white Blender game. Right? Materials, text change color in Blender game engine. Da, 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 da. You need to set the object color in properties display, right? In my properties display, and if you notice, I have my what it's showing is the property, right? Not the material. Why is the material working for us from a color perspective for text? Why wouldn't it work? Because text is not a mesh. Text is text, right? So if I click here as an example, and if I scroll down, this is another button we haven't really looked at for our score label. right? If I scroll down, if you notice the textured material color is white. And if you notice it says maximum draw, right? It says textured or solid or wire or bounds. That's what the maximum draw type is, right? Here it is.
What does it mean?
My object color. It's my object color, right? So because it's an object that I'm painting and it's not a mesh, right? I've got to change the color here. So here's what I would change this thing to black as an example. And you can assign RGBA values to make it transparent and so on. If I converted my text to a mesh, it wouldn't be an issue. But because I haven't done that, even though it appears to be white or black in my my modeling mode, in my game mode, let me try that now. Now it's black, right? Because I've got to change it here in object mode, and I'm going to put this back behind it so you can see my score now. Let me go back into front mode, and here's my front perspective. I'm going to go to front just to make sure it's centered. I'm going to center this thing, right? There it is. Looks pretty centered, but I'm going to make sure that it's just centered a little bit nicer. There we go. And I'm gonna go back into perspective mode now and pull out a little bit. Okay, and let's go back into my approximate camera view. It's my camera view. Go back into this, right? And go back into texture mode, right? And hit here, press play. There it is. Now my score looks like a score. Right? Let's undo that. Hey, here's something different. Look how big it is. Watch. Do you see that too? You should. And the reason why is because we're looking at this score. So move it a little bit aside here. This is some challenges with the scoreboard that we have to make. Here's something. What if I go into like 500 points? Would my scoreboard be big enough? And chances are it wouldn't, right? So what I want to do is again go back into edit mode, knowing that my scoreboard will not be big enough. I'm just going to make it a little bigger, and just make this. That's not what I wanted, of course. I want to go into edit mode. I want to go into 1. I want to kind of zoom in here, kind of go up, and go into wireframe mode, and just select that part here. Move this over just a little bit more because I want to give some space for the score, right? Okay, there's my score, and I want to make it go now. Okay, so I've got my scoreboard working, but how do I test this thing out? How do I make sure that the score works? Well, first of all, we need some kind of collision that we're going to happen, right? So I want this. Every time I collide with something else, I want my score to work. It doesn't have to be that, by the way. It could also be every time I walk through this sensor, right, my score goes up. It could be that as well. So let's set something else to bump into. Right, so I'm going to bump into some kind of sphere. So I'm going to go to Shift S. I'm going to change my cursor to center. Here's my cursor to center, right? And in my center, I'm going to Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh icosphere. Let's add an icosphere this time. We haven't done that before. Here's an icosphere. A bit of a rolly. It's not quite a sphere. I'll leave it like misshapen like that. And I'll add in a material to make this sphere red, just like enemy red, right? In fact, I'll call this icosphere an enemy. And I'll change my material color so it says red. See, I'm naming everything finally. Might as well name my material color to green. I might as well name my material color over here to white. There we go. I've renamed everything. Woohoo. Hey, here's a great time to save. We've made a lot of changes, right? Imagine we did all this work, this logic bricks and all this kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, pop, Blender just like, you know, kicks out, right? Because Blender, that's one thing I got to tell you guys. Blender is open source, right? So because Blender is open source, it could cack out. You never know. If it doesn't like your system or something, that's not good, right? So let's go File, Save, and I'm going to save this in my downloads folder because that's where I want it, right? I'm just going to call this Score. Score.blend. All right, and save. So now my Blender file is saved. Cool, cool. Okay, cool. So I've got my enemy. Here's my enemy, and I've got my player. I'm going to change my physics for my enemy from static. I'm going to make it rigid. I'm going to make it a rigid body, right? It is an actor automatically. I'm going to set my collision bounds. Right now, if you notice, my collision bounds is a box. I'll leave it as a box for my rigid body, right? I'm not going to change this. I'm going to lift it up a little bit, like this. And then when I press play, it should drop, right? If I bump into it, right? Hey man, I can't do anything with it. How come I can't bump it, right? How come, how come? Well, there's a couple things, right? One, remember I've made my gravity 30, right? That's really big. So that's one reason why I can't really do anything. It actually is colliding with this thing. But I'm also not adding torque when I move, right? When I bump into this thing, I'm not actually doing anything, right, to it. I'm just bumping into it, and it's also got a mass right now. If you notice, its mass is 1. I could change the mass to 0.1, make it really light. Here it is, mass of 1, right? Mass of 0.1, and then if I press P again, and then I kind of run into it. I can't really affect it though, right? I can't push it around as a rigid body. Anyone else have a reason why this is happening? You do have the same effect.
For me, it's moving.
For me, it isn't. How everyone else having the same issue as me? Like where I can't push it around like this.
I
Yes.
can push it on
How about you?
from the back.
From the back you can push it. Like this. I can't. What kind of movement did you give your player? Did you give your player character movement, or did you give your player motion, regular simple motion? I give my player character movement.
I gave character
And can you push it around?
only one move.
Only one way, right? Why? Character motion is great. Character motion doesn't give me the ability to push things around as easily. I'll show you that. So let's say, for example, I've got my character. He's a character.
Because one of my lessons.
Right? And if I go back to my logic bricks, right? And let's change my my forward. I'm going to change my forward one. So when I bump into him from forward, instead of character motion, which just adds the y of 0.2, I'm going to change this from character motion to simple motion. I want to show you this, right? And now I'm going to press play, and let's see what happens now, right? Right? Look at this. I can't move him to my right and left, right? Look, can't move them left and right or back, but if I move them to the front, I'll push them off. There's another one. There's also servo control. And servo control is not what we want, right? This is something else for servos. Like, you know, we don't want that. And the reason why this is great, character motion is fantastic for us to move around and jump. That's what the advantage of character motion is. On the disadvantage side, it won't roll the object. Yeah.
Servo, I can put my camera and follow my person.
Yeah, you could do that, but I wouldn't do that way. I would make it so it's parented. It's better.
Okay.
Right? So, like I said, character, this is a character. That's how we've specified it. We specified this as a rigid body. We've also made this a cube, right? If I want to make this so that it's not a box, but yet it's an actual sphere instead, that makes it more complex, right? Especially when it comes to me moving things around. Oh. Now I can't move forward at all. Did I miss it? Yeah, I messed it up. I want to move it back to character motion by accident. Let me go back to simple motion for a second, and I'll show you what this is. Just to note, all right? So just for you guys to see that. So again, if I go back to y is 0.2, right, for simple motion, and that's not what I want. This is move left. It should be actually move left. Sorry, I may have messed things up again. And that's move right, and of course this one I totally messed this up. So go back to simple motion and go forward a little more. So simple motion, what it does is, again, if I press play, then I can actually push this thing around, right? And see how it actually gains a little bit of momentum there? Because now it's a sphere, it's not a cube, so they can roll, because the collision boundaries, I've actually added collision boundaries onto the ground. That's another thing I did. I made you guys do that. And that makes it so that it sees the ground as not just a static body, but a collider, more realistic movement. But also, you need to make this a cube or something else, or a sphere or something else. All right, so let's change I want to keep my jump motion, my character motion, but I want to change these ones. Instead of character motion, I want to change them back to simple motion. For example, move my right, I want to go this way, so I can collide with objects and move them around. So I would do that. I wanted you guys to see the difference between one and the other. So go to simple motion, right? Move back, but leave the jump as character motion, because jump is a really cool little way to do it. There's other ways to do the jump if you don't want to use simple motion or character motion. You could do something like this. You could detect if you're standing on a solid object like the ground, and if you're standing on the ground, then you can jump. That's the other way to do it. And then when you do is you impart force, to the Z direction, so you create your own jump if you want to do that way. More realistic motion. But for our purposes, to make this really nice and quick, we're not going to do that.
If you have to, the object now jumps
Up and down. It doesn't jump forward and back.
moving right.
You can do that too. But watch, if I go here, if I press play, and if I move and jump, it does. See? And if I move this way, it actually moves the ball. See that? See the actual thing does not just move it, but if I bump into it, right, it does impart a bit of spin to the ball as well. Okay, cool. So I can bump into this thing. That's one thing we need to know. Okay, so here's where we have to think about this, right? I want to collide with something, right? And I need to give my enemy a property. Remember, whenever we collide, we want to say, I want to collide with something else, a property, right? So this enemy is going to have a property. I'm going to click on my enemy ball. And in my enemy ball, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a game property, which is down here. Let me just bring this up over here. See this game property? Add a game property for my ball, right? And this is like a variable, right? That's what this thing is. I'm going to add the game property, and we're going to call this enemy. I'm going to make it a Boolean, right? Here's my Boolean. And what I want to do with the game property is I want to click this on as a true. So it's true that it's an enemy. Okay, cool. So that's what this enemy has. Just has one property. Now, let's go back to my ball on my player. Here's my player's logic bricks. I want to add another sensor. So let's click Add Sensor, and we're going to add a collision sensor. Here's a collision sensor, right? So we're going to say this. When, by the way, I'm going to change my collision sensor to say enemy, so I know what I'm colliding with. When I collide with my enemy, well, I need to put in here a property for my collider. I'm going to call this when I collide with a property, an object with a property that is enemy. There we are. Right? When I do that, that's what I'm saying. Then I add an actuator. What do I want to do? If I go to Edit Object, now you're going to think that this is interesting, but if I go to Edit Object, I have to pick the object that I'm editing. So if I pick something like the score, right, well, I can't really do anything. I can change its velocity and stuff like this. That's what I can do if I click Add Object. I can use dynamics by changing Restore Dynamics. I can change to Track to, Replace Mesh, End Object. I can do different things. This isn't what I want. It's not what I want. First, what I want to do is I want to go and add a property, right, as an example, to the scoreboard. I like using the scoreboard itself, like this actual white space here, as a property, or the score itself, this number here, right here, this number here, right? So if I actually click on the number, which is the score, this is my score, I can add a game property. Now look what it says, add text game property, look at this, and I can add a game property. If I can add a text game property, but here's a string, right? I can make this an integer, which is really what I want, right? This is my text game property, right? Oh, this is interesting. I can also add a game property. Let's leave it a text game property for now. This is my score, right? So my score has not the actual score label, but the number. I've added a integer, right? And if you notice, there is no value right now. Let's try this for a second and see what that does. This is something new. Okay, go back to my player, right? So I want to change something. I want to edit my object, right? But I can't add, this edit object isn't for me, right? This edit object is for, the object that I'm editing, right? Okay. What about if I click game? Is that it? Start from file? No, that's not what I want. I can also load and save the game, restart the game, quick game. That's not what it is. So what am I doing? It's not visibility, it's not state, it's not sound, it's not steering, it's not scene, it's not random, it's not, oh, hey, property. I can assign a property, there we go. I can add or change a property, right? So I can add, right, to which property? Well, I don't have a property here that I have anything here. This means my property, not a property of another object, right? I could also go back. So that's what parent, motion, mouse, message. I could send a message, right? I could send a message to my text, right? So there we go. I'm going to send a message to my score. Here's my message to my score, right? And if you notice, if I send a message, if my message could have a body or a subject. Okay, well, that's interesting idea. A message means I'm sending a signal to my score. Okay, so here's my score. And if that means I can send a message to my score, here's my score object for a second. How about my add a sensor that when I receive a message, look, here's a message sensor. When I receive a message with the subject of score, right? Or whatever I want, here's score, or up, here we go, up. I want to make it up. I want to increase my score, or increase. Whatever you want, something that makes sense, like contextual. So I want to increase my score, right? And lowercase increase, right? Then, if I increase my score, I want to change my property, right? I want to add to my text property a value of 100. Right, see if that works, and if I'm going to link those together. So it means if this is by the way, I'm looking at my score, my actual score itself, not the score label, right? So when I receive a message that says increase, I want to change an actuator, a property actuator that adds 100 points to my text property, which is right here, which is an integer. Now right now my text property doesn't start off as anything. The default should be 0. If it's not, I could always change that later. Okay, let's see if this works. So that's the first thing. Now the other thing is, that's the first thing. So it's going to add to my property. I got to send the message now. I got to complete that message, right? So I'm going to right-click on this. So I say, when I collide with my enemy, I'm going to send a message with the subject increase, right, to my score, right? Link those together. Link those together, right? I'm going to send a message to my score that says, hey, increase the score, right? And when I receive it, it's going to change the score from 0 to 100. It's going to add 100 to the score. Let's try this out. So I'm going to kind of simplify this, and I'll go back and show you how I did it again. So here's my object. I'm going to press P for play. I'm going to run into it, and then I get 100. If I run to it again, 200. Again, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. Oh, okay, it's dead. Likewise, right? If I want to subtract from my score, yes?
Sure. It displays just score.
I have two text labels. One, I have two text objects. One is just for the label score, and the other one is the number 0. And then I change the number 0 to whatever I want. That's why I made the score label separate from my score. Otherwise, it wouldn't look right. It wouldn't work. Make sense? So really simple mechanic for actually adding score in. Let me just do that one more time for you guys to see what I did. So again, I did a couple things. I added a collider, a collision sensor, right? I'm gonna pull this way up here if I can, so you can see it. Here it is. So here's my my logic brick, right? It's really big, so you can see way big here. Okay, so I've got my A key, my D key, my W key, my S key, my space bar, and then I have a collision sensor. My collision sensor has to have, it's colliding with an object that has a property of enemy. I added the property of enemy to my enemy object. Make sense? When it collides with my enemy, then send a message, right? Send a message, and my message is going to be increase score. That's going to be my message, right? Increase in my subject. The subject of my message is going to be increase. I'm going to select my score object, not my score label, right? But the actual score value. The score. I'm targeting that for my message. I'm sending a message, right? I'm connecting, if you will, or pinging my my score. I'm saying, hey, score. I'm throwing you a message. Here it is. Increase. When it receives increase, now I got to go back to my score. So I'm going to click on my score value. Here's my score value. And when I receive a message, this is my sensor now. I'm adding a sensor that when I receive a message that has a subject of increase, then I'm going to change my property in my actuator, change a property that adds to my text game property 100 points. Right? And it'll keep on doing that infinitum, ad infinitum, so into forever and ever, basically, until I stop it. So this is a great little mechanic. So I'm actually having a variable, and it's containing my variable, this text property, if you will, is holding my score, right? And it's actually the actual object itself that's holding my score, right? It's showing what my score is. Make sense? Matt, you look a little confused. Have I shown everything yet?
Yeah, it's not showing me a text property.
It has to be text if your object, now remember, my text property is because my version of Blender is 2.75a. Remember I got you guys to upgrade that?
Okay.
Did you do that?
No, I have it downloaded, but I didn't get a chance to it.
If I added a game property and I made this as an example, let's not use a text property, a text game property. Let's change the property to another one. I'm going to make another regular property. I'm going to change this to, we'll call this score. I'll call the property score. Right? Here's my property score. I can do it like this way as well. I'm going to make it an integer, and I'm going to set it to 0 to start off with. This is another way to do it, right? So instead of using my text game property, I'm going to target my score, right? I'm going to add 100 points to it. I can do it that way as well. And if I press play, and if I run into it, it seems that, hey, it's not, how come it's not working, right? Because I'm saying, what was that? No. This is why this game, text game property it's doing it, right? It's actually changing the text game property, right? It's changing it. But it's not actually changing my text, right?
Change to the property, right? From the object.
Well, no, this object right now is got, I'm changing my score. So if I was to do, if you go to game, this is where this is what this little new text game property adds in, because this 0 is actually text. It's not mesh, right? So it gives you two properties. It gives you one, you can have like a variable. I'm keeping track of a score. Sometimes you need to do both. Keep track of a score so you can see it somewhere else, plus change the variable, the text game property. You can have both things happen at the same time. And of course, what we would do is add two property actuators. One for the text game property, so it shows it, and the other one to keep track of it inside the game, right? So let's do that. Let's add both. So one would be, I do have both, but I want to add another actuator. So add an actuator. I'm going to add a property actuator. Here it is, right? And one is my score label. So this is going to be my score value, and this one is going to be my score, my score itself, the actual score text, if you will. Right? And my score text is actually going to add to my text. It's going to change my text, if you will, a value of 100. Right now I've got two of these things. Look, I've got two little dots, but I only have one line, which means I got to make another line. So one thing, one message can hit both things. So not only does my score go up, I'm going to actually, in my game, on the game menu, you can actually go to game and show your debugging information, right? And in order for you to show that, this little eye here, take a look at this little eye over here on the game property, right? I got to click that on too. And when I do that, when I press play, I see that on the left, I have a score, right? A little debug property that shows my score is 0. And when I run into my object, right, not only does my score go up, but my text changes, right? Every time I hit it. Make sense? Two properties. Text property that changes the text value, right? Score property that changes the integer if I want to keep track of the number. Here's something that you want to try. You may want to try as well. I've mentioned that my property is changing, right? Well, and I'm still targeting my score, the actual 0, right? Now, right now, I'm responding to a message. Take a look at this. Here's my message that I'm responding to. I can also add another sensor here. Let's try this out too. I'm adding another sensor, right, that detects property. So I say that if my property changes, look at this, watch this. So if my property is changed, so what property is changing? If my score property has changed, I can detect this too. So here's my score property. It's changing, right? Then, what do I want to change? Let's add another actuator. So what other actuators could I do? I could edit my object, right? Right? I can edit my object. I can replace my mesh. I can end my object. I can add it. I can do whatever I want to do. I could do that here too. I could. Or, and this isn't the right thing to do, right? What else could I do? I could look at the parent. I could send another message, right? I could do other things. Action. Here's an action I can take. I can play. I can do an animation if I want to, right? There's a property action. There's a property action I can use as well, right? I can target my property, which is my score or my text value. I can do all kinds of crazy things, right? I don't recommend this though. This is the I would say this is a misaligned kind of thing. If you have a text game property, and you should, right? Do you?
Yeah.
Then use that. That's the one you want to use. You don't want to use the regular game property for detecting. I'm just going to get rid of this. You want to use the text game property for showing the text value, and you want to keep track of the score, physical score, like an actual value, inside your thing as well, because this actually keeps track of the score. So if I press play, again, if you notice on the top left corner, my debug values show a score of 0 because I've assigned a variable with a score of 0, right? One more thing. Okay, so now I've got a score of 0. Let's do the same things. Here's a lab for you for today as a little bit of a trial. Add lives. So fine, if I hit the red ball, right, I get a score of 0 because it's my enemy, right? I've got maybe my enemy, I lose points, but if it's a pickup, something else, like let's say a coin, right? I actually gain life, and I get rid of the coin. How do I do that, right? Well, let's make a coin, first of all, right? Let's see if we can do this really quickly. So I'm going to Shift A. First of all, let's just minimize this, the logic bricks. So again, when I'm modeling, I minimize my logic bricks. When I'm doing stuff with logic bricks, I minimize my modeling, right? My 3D space, right? Okay, so let's Shift S to put my cursor to center. There it is. I'm going to Shift A, and I want to make a coin. Okay, fine. Let's add in a circle. This is how I want to make my coin. Here's my circle. And if you notice on the left-hand side here, ladies and gentlemen, on the left-hand side it shows my vertices as 32. It's a lot of vertices for a coin. Let's cut this down. And if I was actually going to just to run into my circle here for a second, this is what my circle looks like. Once I start cutting down the vertices, it gets to be a little bit more, you know, coin-like, like this, like 9, 8. Here's 8. Right? That's pretty good. So my, maybe 8 is not enough. Maybe I can go to 10. There we go. Or maybe even 12. Sorry, that might be better. 12 is good. All right, so this is my coin, right? Now it's just a circle right now, right? That's all it is. I want to make this so that it's I give it a little bit of depth. How do I do that? Quick way of doing it. I want to make a circle into a flat coin. What do I do?
Edit mode, extrude.
Edit mode, extrude. But the way to do that, if I go to edit mode, first of all, what I want to do is I want to merge everything or create a face at the center. If I can do that by, if you look on the left, if I scroll down, if I go merge as center, right, it's gone. That's not what I want, right? If I press F, I create my face, right? That's the first thing I'd like to do, F, right? And now that I've got it faced, right, I've only got I'll make sure that in control mode, I control tab into vertex mode, make sure I'm in vertex mode. I want to go into wireframe mode for a second, right? And I'm going to deselect all and just select the path around this thing. So if I was going to do that, of course it's Alt right click, right? So this selects my entire path. Even though my face lights up, that's not really what I care about. I'm going to press E for extrude and then enter to create an extra set of points. I'm duplicating the number of points. And now I'm going to press E for extrude and then pull up. Right? If you notice, I can make my coin any way I like. Right? So there's my coin. If I was going to go into solid mode, it looks like this now. Right now, right? Almost looks like a little coin, right? Let's go back into wireframe mode. Okay, this is cool, but what I want to do now is I want to select all, so both my points and whatever, right? And what I want to do is kind of extrude inward, right? So how would I do that? I want to press E for extrude, enter, right? Now I'm going to scale inward. Scale, I'm going to scale in, right? And if you notice, I'm scaling my top points in. If I go to Z mode, you can't see it, right? But there is an extra set of points that are inside here. This is one way to do it. The other way to do it, I'm going to undo that, right, is I want to do it one face at a time. So let's say deselect all. I'm going to go into Control Tab to select the top vertices, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude, but I'm going to extrude. If I extrude up, it extrudes just the vertices up, right? I want to extrude them in, right? So I want to kind of do one of these. Extrude in, just a little bit to give my coin a little bit of an edge, right? If I want to do both, let's do that both. So I want to go both the top and the bottom, right? So here's my top and my bottom vertices. So here's this one, and then Shift Alt right click, Shift Alt right click. There's my top and bottom vertices, right? And if I go, I've already extruded everything. So if I go kind of scale inwards, right? Now it does this. Now there's a problem, right? I didn't have extra points for my top. I only made them for one side. So I'm going to undo for a second. Just get back to my circle just to make sure I got this right. And we'll do it again. So here's my circle. I'm going to extrude, enter for extra points. Extrude up a little bit to give my ridge for my coin. Right now, this ridge is selected. I want to shift Alt select the bottom of my coins as well, but not these other pieces, not the areas in between. Right. Now I'm going to extrude and then press enter for extra points, and then scale and scale inward to create that ridge on both sides. Okay. And now what I want to do, right, is I want to extrude down, right, or in, and what that's going to do with my in is going to make that ridge kind of solid, right? So I can go extrude, enter, and then extrude, and if you notice, if I press on the Z direction, I get kind of in and out. I want to do it you know, so that way, here it is. Scaling doesn't do it, but scaling creates this area here, right? What I want to do is I want to extrude in, right? Both them inwards, right? If I press E and N, right? So across the Z-axis or the Y-axis, right? That really doesn't do what I want to do. It means I got to select each one separately. So I'll deselect all, right? And if I'll show you, it looks like this is in solid mode now. This is kind of one way I like to do it. And then Alt, select the inner ridge, and then extrude, and then push down a little bit to create that inner ridge. Now the other side is not that way, so I'll do the same thing. And again, you can monitor this different ways. Extrude, and then kind of push it up a little bit. And now I've kind of got a ridge to my coin. There's my coin, right? Kind of a quick and dirty way of doing it, right? Now there's ways of doing it. You can download a coin face and put it onto an actual flat surface, flat circle. Just give it a little bit of you know, material and texturing and so on. But this is kind of an easy way to do it. I want to make this whole thing now yellow, right? And reflective, because that's what my coin is going to be like. So here's my coin. I'm going to go new. My new material, I'm going to call this material yellow, right? And I'm going to make my diffuse color really yellow, right? And shiny, because it's got to be a shiny coin. Maybe really bright too, because I got to make my intensity really bright. And you know what? If I really want to, I can make it shadeless, so it's going to glow. But I think this is good enough. There's my coin. I'm going to rotate my coin now on the x-axis 90 degrees so I can see it, and pull back. Rotate on the x-axis, sorry, 90 degrees, and pull back. There's my coin. Do you guys have the coin yet? Right? Okay, so my coin is going to be over here. My enemy is going to float up here. You know what? Let's make my coin drop too. Right now, if you look at my coin, here's my coin. My physics for my coin is a static object. I don't want that. I want my physics for my coin to be some kind of rigid body so it can fall off this thing when it rolls, right? And if I press play, this is what it does. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Now that I've done all these Z and everything else, when I went to wireframe mode, I got to go back. So if I press play, then it kind of sits there. If I want to, so the coin falls or rolls or whatever, I can definitely add different physics properties to make it do so. The other thing is I have a rigid body, but I have no colliders, right? My collision bounds right now is a box. For my coin, this is what it looks like for the box, right? Take a look. It's a little off, eh? Take a look. Why is my coin off? Anybody have an idea? I can tell you why. Oh, there it is. How come my collision bounds, and then yeah, my origin, right? So I got to set my origin to my geometry, or else my collision bounds will be off too, right? Because I created my coin from scratch, right? So set origin to geometry. Oh no, set origin to geometry. There we go. And now, if you notice, my coin is a box. If I want to make my coin wrap exactly, so you know what, if it has to be colliding a little bit better, then I may want to choose another type of collider down here. Instead of a box, I can choose a cylinder, a sphere, a cone, you know, and the best and most complex is convex hull. Convex hull actually wraps it around. So it's like almost like pixel perfect collision. Bad. Bad. But the great thing about this from a colliding perspective is from a simulation aspect, right? It rolls now. See how that rolled? Want to show it again? Right, watch this, watch it roll. Bang, 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 right? It's going to roll over on its side because it's a real coin now, right? It looks like a real coin. And I can give it a little bit of bounce. For example, if I go back to the material type and I scroll down, and, you know, as an example, right now, from a physics perspective, it has no real elasticity. Let's increase my elasticity to about 0.5. A little bit of bounce. So when a coin hits, it bounces. Let's try this out. Bounce. Right? Now it's going to roll a little bit more, right? And my ground, I can do the same thing. I can add elasticity to my ground. We talked about this before. This is dangerous stuff, guys, when you add elasticity, because it makes it so the ground is bouncy. Let's make 0.5 elasticity for my ground as well. Press play. Now there's a bit of bounce, and my coin rolls. And I can do the same thing probably for my alien object, right? So I'm going to go into my my face here, and I'm going to add in some elasticity, maybe added a 0.5 elasticity, so a bit of a bounce. It just doesn't just fall. That's what bounce does, you know, kind of makes it so it's interesting. Press play, and then now my coin and my object, you know, kind of have elasticity. That's good. Okay. I got a problem though. I can't hardly see anything, right? Because
Coin is dynamic or rigid body?
it's rigid body. I like making my stuff rigid body for it to have more realistic kind of from that perspective. I need a little bit better of a light source though. If I'm going to make my coin not glow like this and have a three-dimensional feel to it, I probably need a couple more light sources. So a good thing to do, if I go back to top view, all right, here I am in top view, and if you look, my only thing that's really kind of highlighted with my current light source is my sphere, my icosphere, right? So if I want to put some more lighting, I might want to put things at a couple of corners of my game board, or some, you know, two sides. So I'm going to say Shift D for my light source, right? And then I'm going to go across the y-axis to kind of put it near the back. So I have a little bit of lighting on that side. I'm going to also press my light source again. So here's my lamp. Shift D, right, for my light source. And then across the y-axis, I want to kind of move it behind my character somewhere. So a little bit more lighting, because I think lighting is a big part of gaming, right? So we haven't talked too much about that. And I want to go back to the front view. So here's my front perspective view. I got a bit of a more lighted surface. Now my coin does take up my score, kind of it's in front of my score, and I'm going to put it to the right so I can see it. There it is. So here it is, coin, enemy. Okay, let's do this, guys. All right, so what my coin is, I need to add a game property to my coin. I'm going to add a game property. I'm going to call this thing coin, right? And I'm going to make it a Boolean value. This is my coin property, okay? And I'm going to make it, I'm going to kind of turn it on. So I'm going to say now my coin has a coin property. Now it's actually labeled circle. I should probably change it to coin, right? I'm also going to change my enemy, right? My enemy has a enemy property, right? Here's my enemy property. And my player, remember my player, the only time he's going to gain any kind of positive collision with my I'm going to add score is when I collide with my enemy. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to change my label here. So instead of collision with my enemy, it's collision with the coin. I'm going to listen to my coin collision, right? And then I'm going to gain points from my coin, but not from my enemy anymore. My enemy, I want to make another type of collision. So here's my player. I'm going to add another sensor, another collision sensor. Let's try this out really quickly, right? And my collision sensor is going to be with my, it's the enemy collision. And when I'm going to detect that the enemy is, I'm colliding with my enemy here. And on the right, on the right, this is my message that says increase score. I want to send a message, right? I want to send a message to, I don't have a life label, but I will put one. I will create a life label that sends a message to my life label that says decrease my life label by 1. Right, so I have X number of lives, and I want to decrease my life label to whatever I want. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, first of all, I need a life label for that to happen, right? And that's number 1. So we can do that. But let's add that message first, just as a placeholder. So I'm going to say message, right? I don't have my life label. My subject is going to be decrease, right? Decrease. And that's going to be my subject. I'm going to connect them. It's not going to go anywhere right now because there is no destination for my message. My destination, there is no to for my message, right? My message only has a subject but no destination. I need to make a destination, which means I'm going to make another score label like this, but instead of a score label, it's going to be called lives label. So let's kind of zoom in here. I'm going to just decrease this logic break stuff for a second. I'm going to go over here to my score, right? So I've got my score and my score label. I'm going to Shift D, right? I'm going to move it up around across the Z-axis, right? Just so it's above my score. And I'm going to go into my score label, tab in, right? and modify this so it says lives, right? And the same thing goes with here. I'm going to tab in, and instead of starting at 0, I'm going to start it off at 5, right? It's key, 5 lives, right? And tab out. Here, I want to increase my scoreboard so it gives me a bit of a bigger box, right? So I'm going to go into tab in there, go into wireframe mode, use B select, and select the top of my box, and I'm just going to increase the size of it so it kind of encompasses it, both my score and my lives. Go back into solid mode, change my solid mode into textured shading so I can see it when I play the game. There's my lives, and then change the name of it, because I think I need to do that as well, right? So tab out, change the name from lives label, this is my lives label, or score label, to lives label. So I keep track of that. And then my score 001, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to change this to, it's got to say lives. All right, so there's lives. Okay, now remember, when I have lives, because I had my score in here before, I have a text property. It's already there. Because I copied it, it's there. And my property is score. I also have a score property. I'm going to change this to a lives property. Right? I'll make sure that that points to lives. There we go. And I want to subtract or add a -1 to this thing, right? When I actually keep track of my lives. And my property, I'm going to add a -1 to my text value, right? Here's my score text. It's not going to be score text, it's going to be lives text. Just modifying everything so it works. And this is score lives value. You can see the video after this, guys. You'll see what I'm doing if I'm going too quickly. And instead of decrease, I'm looking for a increase. I'm looking for a decrease. That's my message, right? Because I'm looking at the lives number, right? Okay, that's good. I'm almost got it complete. Now I got to change my my player, my collision for my player. So when I collide with my enemy, right, then I want to send a message to my lives, here's my lives, to decrease. Right? Send a message to my lives to decrease.
We're doing only the text or the both score and
Just my lives, just the score, the actual number again. Not my lives label or my score label, but my actual number.
No, like you did 2 properties, right? Text property, game property.
I have 2, and I just changed the number. I changed the name from score to lives.
Here,
In here itself. So if you notice, here is my coin property. I have to have I have a coin property, right? And this is cool, right? In my enemy, I have an enemy property. In my lives, I have both a text game property, which is an integer, and I also have a lives property to keep track of how many lives I have. I want to start my lives at 5, right, to keep track of what it's like. And when I press play, this is what you see. Lives equal to 5. Take a look at the right, guys. Lives equal to 5 up here, right? And then score is equal to 0. When I collide with my enemy, right, my lives drop to 4. When I collide with my coin, my score goes to 100. Make sense? Enemy, I lose a life, score, I gain something. And I can actually push my coin around, right? Until it falls off the edge. Bye. Make sense? So this is the way to control a score. And again, we did a very basic scoreboard here. The next time we get together, I want to talk about making a HUD, a heads-up display, the same kind of idea, but instead of making a scoreboard that's way over on the corner, it's going to be right in your camera's face. Right? So no matter where your camera is looking, it sees the score nicely and clearly because it's in the same field of view as your camera. Right? And it's in front of everything else. Right now the score appears behind everything else because that's where it's positioned physically on the game board. Right? This is my score. Right? This doesn't make any sense for real-time play. What I really want to do is there's my camera, right? And if I zoom in on my camera for a second, there's my camera. My camera's looking here, right? on the face of my camera, I want to put my score. That's where I want to put my score stuff. And that's what it would be. It looks like the camera would have something in front of it, which it would, right? Because when we're looking at the game, anything that goes behind my score, right? My score is always visible. My score is on top. And from a layering perspective, the highest value is always going to be something that's in front of the camera, right? So this is what we position. And the way, of course, to do this in a quick and dirty way is to position the camera looking face down, like from a top orthographic view. Put the score, like actual text, right against the camera as close as possible. Like you have to look at the camera to make sure it's like that, right? Parent the text to the camera, right? And then parent the camera to the object. When the object moves around, the camera moves around, the text moves around with it. It's all nice and easy. It can all be done. And it's a neat little HUD effect. You can do the same thing instead of using score. You can do the same thing by adding objects and deleting objects. Let's say, for example, and really quickly before we go, as a concept, we don't like numbers in video games, especially on things like, for example, and well, score is okay as a video game number, right? But for lives, let's say my player lives, I want it to have squares. So every time I have 5 squares or whatever, maybe my life is a bunch of dashes, right? And when my life drops, I lose a dash or I lose a square as opposed to losing a number. How do I do that? Who's got an idea of how to do that? It's a bloody object, right? So every time I lose a score, right, I wipe away an object, right? And depending on what my score is, I have X number of objects. My object could be a flat plane with a picture on it. My picture could be the slashes, whatever they are, and I can just change, occlude, make, hide certain pieces of the object to make it look like it's going down. But actually, all I'm doing is showing you another picture. Replacing the mesh. I can have multiple meshes. So there's different ways of doing it is what I'm trying to say. This is the cheap and dirty way of doing it by having the scoreboard, exactly what we did, way out in the distance. It's kind of cool if you're making a 3-dimensional scoreboard that you're looking at. Not cool when you're making a 2D game. Not really cool when you want a HUD, a heads-up display with some kind of information that's coming back at you in the game. And even in Unity, I'll tell you right now, we're going to probably do it so that there's going to be some kind of heads-up display with the score that's showing in the camera's face as opposed to hanging in 3D space. That doesn't make any sense. Unless you want that type of effect. Unless that's the type of effect you want to achieve. All right, any questions before we end for the day?
So the test was Friday?
Friday, it's going to be at a regular time frame, 4:30, right? We're going to do something with logic bricks. Hint, hint, we're going to do all the stuff we talked about already, moving a guy around. I might have you import something because we talked about importing a mesh, right? So get your logic brick game on, right? I would definitely practice using logic bricks, making different things, and you have a limited time frame of putting things together, and then you'll be able to do something very simple for the game. I'm also going to give you your assignment, your next assignment, which is going to be more of a game-like assignment. Before I haven't given you that. Now you have almost all the piece parts you need. You have definitely some kind of modeling experience, right? Now you're going to have logic brick experience, and the assignment's going to assimilate both those two things together. You're going to put your modeling experience with your logic bricks to make a simple game. All right? And that's it for today, guys.